Let us be right where you are, Father. Let us go just as Jesus went.
Who you are and what you've done for us, what you've done for us. Oh, the world sees and soon forgets who you are and what you are and what you've done for us, what you've done for us. forget. We will not forget who you are and what you've done for us. What you've done for us. Though the world seems to forget, we will not forget who you are and what you've done for us. What you've done for us. Though the world seems to forget, we will not forget who you are and what you've done for us. What you've done for us. Forget who you are and what you've done for us. What you've done for us.
Let your reality be known. Let your presence be so real and so full, God, that there is no room for doubt. Lord, we pray for wounds that have been caused by the church or by man. We pray, God, that you would heal those this morning. Lord, you're saying that to one here this morning, that the wounds that you carry that are caused by the experiences that you've had here on this broken earth are not from me. You've blamed me for so long, but they're not from me. I love you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I was with you in your darkest moment, in your darkest hours. Even when you refused to believe me and see me, even when I was rejected by you, I have stood beside you and I have loved you. I created you. I made you. I purposed you. But I will not force you to come to me. I will not force you to walk with me, because that would not be love. You've made your choices, and I don't even see those anymore. All I see is the beautiful creature before me, the beautiful, beautiful girl before me that I created and fell in love with as a father loves a child. Even now, it's so hard for you to receive because of the wounds that this broken world has inflicted upon you. But I'm here and I'm waiting. And whether you open your heart and your eyes to me today, or tomorrow, or some further off time, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. You are my daughter, and I am your daddy, and I love you. Words that you've stopped believing in. I love you. My heart is that you would allow me to love you just this morning. I love you. intimate relationship with God. You're holy. Worship you, my God. Every heartbeat, every moment, Lord, I give it all to you. How you see me, no one can see me, no one can see me like you do. I can't begin, oh God, I can't begin to understand your ways, understand your ways. How you see me, no one else can see me. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way. I know you love me. I know you love me. Here am I today. Oh God, have your way. Have your way. Have your way. We're going to go a little outside the box here this morning, but that's what we do. So, it's just so strong on my heart this morning that there are some of us who have felt hidden from the sight of God for a while or for a long time maybe. Whether our eyes haven't been set on Him or whether we just feel like we couldn't find Him. And this morning I just feel like God's saying this is your morning for breakthrough and freedom. Freedom from that barrier that's been between you or that hiding. I keep seeing a shadow. Maybe you feel like you've just been in a shadow of life. going through day to day, but saying, God, where are you? Maybe you haven't even questioned, just made up your mind that He's not there. But this morning, I just encourage you, if you would just come forward. I really want to, I'm only asking not to embarrass you or to put you on the spot, but I just want to pray over you and sing over you and allow God to bring forth this promise and this word and this truth that He's speaking into a revelation for you, into a manifest presence of Him here today. He'll meet us in those dark places, but He asks us to walk by faith. And if we know that we know that we know, then it's not really faith. It's those uncomfortable moments and those uncomfortable times when He calls us to move outside of the norm, outside of our comfortable place. That's the faith. When you're not 100% sure what's going to happen, you're not 100% sure if this thing is real, if this moment is real. That's the faith. And if you're willing to risk it and take a step of faith this morning, I'm telling you, it is so heavy on my heart that I say it in complete confidence that He will meet you here today and you will experience God beyond anything you thought possible. So right now, church, I'm calling you forth with me. Meet me up here if you are just even needing that fresh awakening, that fresh sight, that fresh vision, that fresh touch. It's just been too long. Or that first touch from God, that first encounter with Him. In Jesus' name. We're just going to keep praying and worshiping a bit.
Yes. I want to share something real quick to go along with that. As Kim was singing earlier about things happening to you when you were in a place and feeling like you were hidden, feeling like, I want to take it even a step further. She was speaking prophetically to someone in here, and God showed me a picture of a little girl. And this little girl, I'm wearing a little nightgown. And you may not be a little girl anymore. You may be a young lady. You may be an older lady. It doesn't matter. But I saw all the way back to things that happened to you. And I kept hearing you say, if God was real, why did He allow that to happen to me? If God was real, why did He allow that to take place in my life? And I saw someone with a belt disciplining you over and above the top of what normal discipline would be. I saw you hurt, and I saw you in a place, but then God spoke to me and said, even the belt and the discipline didn't hurt near as bad as the words that were spoken over you. That the words spoken over you did more damage than the physical. So when she began to sing that, she was singing over you. So I want you to feel the release, because even if you don't think God's real, He will prove Himself to you today. I don't know who that's for. If somebody else in here has been frustrated, you've been trying to build something with your own hands, and you feel like it's been frustrated and it's not going anywhere. And I felt the Lord saying, the moment you get into a reality where you get the blueprints of how I want it built, then things will start working out. Because I'm trying to change some things. I'm trying to take you to a deeper place, a deeper level. And all you can see is what you want, what you've done, and what you think has worked in the past. But God says, I want to do a new thing in your life. This has something to do with ministry. This has something to do with something you're putting your hands to. I want you to come forth. I want to pray for you. If that was you, if that speaks to your heart, if you feel like you've had things in your life, I want you to come forward, and the ministry team is just going to pray for you. This is just what we do. We're just not church as usual. We're about going deep deeper. We're about allowing God to touch the hurts that sometimes we just try to cover up and pretend like aren't there. This is a safe place. Thank you. Won't you come as they worship? Come on. Won't you come? Thank you, Lord, that you're just getting us to a place where we don't have to be in a hurry. Where we know you, above all, want to touch everybody in this place individually. Forgive us, Lord, where we get in such a hurry sometimes. Thank you for your worship, Lord. In Jesus' name, I pray your word strike the heart of every one of us here. Thank you, Lord. Amen. You know, for a while now, God has been speaking so many things to my heart and to Amy and I and giving us glimpses. And God has been so faithful to give us glimpses, and He speaks to me a lot of times through dreams. And sometimes they're very symbolic, and you have to glean from them what it is God's showing you. But it's amazing to me when He'll spend sometimes years giving me bits and pieces and glimpses into what He's about to do. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, He just like begins to put those pieces together, and it's almost like it just plays out like a perfect story. And it's one of those wow moments, one of those aha moments. Which one of y'all is musically talented? You got any music? It's this one? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to share something with you later. Okay. It's very fitting when God began to show, and sometimes when God begins to show you things that you are to be, generally in your life you may be completely absent of those things. It's even amazing here, God has been speaking to us about a younger generation for so long now, and one of the first areas we were attacked in was in the younger generation, and we lost most of it. But see, the enemy attacks what he knows is going to be one of your strengths. That's what he does. He's not an idiot. He knows that if you're called to a certain thing and you have a certain strength in your life, he is going to do whatever he can to attack that strength, because if he can totally dismantle that strength in your life, it will never rise up to be something that impacts his little kingdom. He's okay with you to be operating in your weaknesses. He has no problem with that. But your strengths he will go after. And if he can't stop that strength, he will cause that strength to run ahead of you, and you'll trip up in that strength. Sometimes your greatest strength can also be your biggest weakness. I know it sounds confusing, doesn't it? It just all depends on the season in your life. Goliath was killed by David using his sword, his own sword. He struck him with a stone, but he also took his head off with Goliath's own sword. Goliath's own strength and this huge, massive sword became his undoing. Oftentimes it can be that way. David, the biggest battle David ever fought was not with Goliath, it was not with a lion and a bear, it was with himself. And he about lost the entire kingdom because his greatest strength in being a king turned out to be his undoing. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I want to start in Judges 6. And God spoke to me this week, and He gave me two different things, one from the Old Testament, one from the New Testament. And the stories appear to be completely unrelated, but as God began to speak to me this week, He said, I want you to go back and read the story of Gideon. I was like, well, I know, I've preached on that, Lord. I've shared stories about that. We all know the story of Gideon. Mighty man of valor. And God says, yeah, but I want you to go a little deeper, because there's aspects of what was happening that I want to show you something different. See, God desires that we go deeper. I don't care how deep you've gone, there's always deeper still. I don't care if you get to that deeper, there'll always be another level of deeper. It doesn't stop, and it will not stop until you actually split the heaven's gates wide open and go to heaven. And guess what? There's more there too. That's when you really get the aha moment. That's what it was all for. I know many of us in here have, you say, oh, when I get to heaven, I've got so many questions. I've got so many questions that I've been seeking for in this lifetime, and some of them just may not get answered until you get there. But that's okay. Judges 6. I want you to go down to verse 7, but I'm just going to fill you in. The children of Israel were in a place where the enemy had taken them captive for 7 years. Now this was because they began to sin against God. God told them, do not fear their gods. Do not do this, do not do that. And they did it. We're people. Don't put your finger in a light socket. We do it. Don't try to get toast out of the toaster with a fork. but I do it. All things that I've learned the hard way is not a good thing to do. Shut the breaker off before you change out that plug. What's the point in that? See, sometimes, a lot of times, the houses I lived in, I didn't know what breaker went to what plug, so I would just cross the wires and short them out, and then whatever breaker flipped, and I knew, hey, problem solved. I was not called to be a constructionman. Larry knows this well. But every time Israel came to a place in this 7-year period, every time they tried to plant a crop, do anything, reap a harvest, every time they tried to do a single thing, the enemy immediately moved in like locusts and began to consume the land. So that's where you find Gideon was at the point where he was sick and tired of his harvest being taken, so he's threshing wheat in a wine press. Now you got to get this picture. He was in a place he was frustrated, and what did he do? He went down into a hole and he went deeper. Oh, you're going to get that in a minute. In verse 7 it said, "And it came to pass, when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet to the children of Israel, who said to them, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from the land of Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage. And I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. Also I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell, but you have not obeyed my voice." Verse 11, "Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under a terebinth tree." Terebinth tree is a whole lot like an oak tree. Some versions of the Bible actually say oak tree. There's different variances of it, but it's a terebinth tree. Actually, one of the names that you will find that Gideon actually had was actually related to the terebinth tree. Now you'll see, which was in Orpah, which belonged to Joash, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Now isn't that like God to show up and say something to the opposite of what Gideon is doing? Gideon's hiding in a winepress. Can you imagine looking out over the land and all you see is a puff of wheat flying up from the ground? And you can't see anybody. So he's hiding and he's just trying to hang on to what little bit he got because he's just so sick and tired of the enemy taking it every time he gets something. Anybody ever feel like in your life you just go 2 steps forward, 1 step back? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It just seems like a never-ending story. My sister got to the point where she was just waiting for it. Every time something good happened to her, she would actually say, she'd say this very thing. She would say, "Yeah, but I'm just waiting for the other shoe to fall." Come on, we've all done it. We get so conditioned in this life that we totally talk ourselves out of blessing at times. So let's continue on. And it said, Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us from the hands of the Midianites." God, you're going to have to show me a sign, because all I do is I read stories in the Bible and in the Scriptures of how God did all these amazing things to my fathers, but I yet have not seen any of them. You see, there is a place and a time. I'll be honest with you, growing up as a young child, and you're going to see a pattern here if you go over to Luke 4. We're going to go over there real quick too. Luke chapter 4. That is a story of the Samaritan woman. And I'm going to go into that story a little bit too, because once you tie the two together, you'll really understand what God is saying. Everybody good over there? You get there? Say yeehaw. John 4 verse 5. "So he came to a city," we're talking about Jesus here, "of Samaria." They believed that they were the true religion. Samaritans were someone that were kind of looked down upon. But they actually had a traditional belief of the old scriptures, and they believed that they were the only true religion of that time, and they knew exactly how to get it done. But there became almost like a weirdness between them, and they got to be looked at as if they were just beneath everyone. They were just kind of the outcast. And they, which was called Sychar, near a plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now I want you to catch that. you see Gideon underneath by a tree in a wine press in an area that belonged to his father Joash. Now he is now in that land. You now see a Samaritan woman hanging out, and she comes to a well that belonged to their fathers before them, and they were in a new place. Now Jacob's well was there. Now Jacob, basically back up, Jacob gave this to Joseph, his son. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well, and it was about the 6th hour. And a woman of Samaria came in to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Verse 9, then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" See, that was just unheard of back then. They were just kind of like lower class. They wouldn't do that. Jews didn't see them that way. For the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is you say this to, 'Give me a drink,' and you would have asked him, he would have given you living water." And the woman said to him, "Sir, you don't even have anything to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as well as the sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of the water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become to him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw any more." Now see, this is what happens when God wants to take you to a place of a what I call a shift in your thinking. We have been so conditioned in the church to think a certain way. Jesus is trying to open her up to a complete shift in the supernatural, and she's still thinking of it in the natural. "Oh, well, that'd be kind of nice if I had that water. Where do you buy that? What store can I buy that in? Because it sure be nice not to have to go and buy a Coke every morning. It sure be nice not to have to go get a cup of coffee down at the Circle K. It'd be nice if I didn't have to do this. You're saying one drink and I'm done for life? Woo, sign me up. How much is this bottle?" It's like miracle spring water. Don't even make me go there. Listen, church has been peddling that stuff for years. "Oh, just donate X amount of dollars to my ministry, and I'll bring you miracle spring water." Yeah, please. There is a shift that God is taking this woman, and I love it because when she finally gets it, and she finally gets to a place where even Jesus alerts her to something in her life, and says, "Why don't you go back and seek your husband on this?" And she says, "Well, I don't have a husband." He said, "Well, you said well because you've had 5, and the one you're with now is not even your husband." See, this is what I call Jesus, the Spirit-filled man. He's basically speaking a word of knowledge over this lady and saying, "Look, I know exactly where you're at." See, the same way that Gideon was caught in a perpetual motion for 7 years because of the sins of the people, he couldn't quite break out of that box. Here's a woman that's going from man to man to man to man because she can't break out of that box. She's seeking something that she cannot find. I've got people in my family, I swear, as soon as they get done with one relationship, they're not even done and gone, and they're looking for the next one. They can't be content with just being the Lord and them for a season. Because we do that. We look for substitutes in our lives to fill our lives with what we think we need. That's why we have entertainment. Entertainment is to get us to a place where we don't have to think about our lives for a few hours. We escape to movies. And I love movies. I'm not saying anything wrong with them. Sometimes escape is good. But I'm just saying sometimes we use things to escape our reality when God is trying to shift our reality to something supernatural and we just miss it. But there is a repetition that is going on in the church today that God is trying to break us out of the box. I will tell you right now, religion sickens me. The Samaritan people were caught in a perpetual trap, and they thought that they had the true religion of the time. Gideon was in a place where, you know what, I'm tired of hearing about stories about how God did this and God did that, because I don't see it happening in my life. It happened when my dad saw it, and my granddad may have saw it, but I haven't seen it yet, and I'm just getting kind of sick and tired of it. So I'm going to make do as I can make do, and I'm just going to go over here and try to utilize a wine press. It wasn't created to be a threshing floor. And I'm just going to do what I got to do to get mine. Because at this point, this religious stuff ain't working for me. I believe the Samaritan woman was in a place in her life. I'm tired of the over and over from one bad relationship to the next. And this religious stuff just ain't working for me no more. Now this well belonged to my fathers and my father's fathers, and they dug these wells, and there are scriptures that say you need to go back and redig the wells. But God was saying, look, I don't want you just to go to the well and back to what your fathers knew. I want you to go even beyond that, to go down below the well to the river that's flowing. We've got to get outside of our stinking thinking. We are so concerned. You can walk into any Christian bookstore in this city, which you won't find many. I think there used to be one that shut down. Or area, region. You have to go far to find it. Most everything's online now. Everything geared in there is how you can be a better person. How you can do this. How you can do that. How you can take care of this. How you can have the anointing. But you rarely see a book that says how you can set up the next generation to have more than what you did. How you can speak and prophesy over your children and let them see more than you ever thought you could see. Listen, I'm going to tell you, I was raised in church. A little church called Silas Baptist Church out in the middle of nowhere in Bourbon County, Kentucky. 44 years my grandmother played the organ in that church. With one eye. The other eye was on me. I was bad. I was bored, and when I got bored, I did stuff. Biggest whooping I ever got was when I took a quarter and drew pictures on the church wall. You didn't know a quarter could make marks on the wall, it will on the cement wall. I learned that. They took all my pens and pencils. I improvised. Ooh, quarters make nice marks. Yeah, so's a belt. I learned that one the hard way. But you know, I grew up in church to the point to where I heard every Bible story. I read about Gideon. I read about all these things. While the church was so busy telling me about stories, they failed to tell me how I could be the story of my own adventure in God's eyes. I was forced and sat and listened to the stories of great generations before me, but I was never released to actually be a great generation for those after me. I was taught these were stories that happened, but we couldn't believe for these things anymore. When I was 6 years old, God spoke to me. And I was riding with a pastor in his car, 6 years old, when God spoke to me and said, "You're going to be a minister like him." 6. Do you think anybody in the church from that point till I was in my early 20s ever one time confirmed that word over me? No. I was taught when you're called to ministry, you're called to ministry, you're called to be a pastor. That's it. That's all there was. One. Then I read the Bible and find out there's 4 other things you could do. And then I start reading more and find out even outside of those, there's unlimited possibilities of what you could be. It wasn't until I was later in my 20s and I'm floating on a ship in the Mediterranean on the USS Saratoga, and I began to read my Bible for the first time. And God began to give me visions in my head of me ministering. Yet, still did a man confirm that word over me? No. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know who to talk to. And frankly, I was just a typical sailor, and every other word out of my mouth started with an F-bomb. I didn't know how to talk without it. That's just the way it was. I was a sailor. But one day God takes us all the way to England and takes us to a place outside of where we grew up. And then God yet again begins to speak over my life and show me visions and dreams of what I'm supposed to be doing. And my first thought was, I remember when God gave me a word, very first word He gave me out of the Bible was the man who built his house upon the rock and the man who built his house upon the sand. And he spoke to my heart. He said, I brought you to England for this time to put a foundation in your life. Because up to this point, you've only had religion. Now it's time for you to get relational. Now, I didn't know what that meant because I watched my daddy as a Baptist preacher rise and fall hard. I watched the church cover up his sin and run him out of town. I watched how, instead of dealing with the issues and loving him, they bought my mother's contract out to teach for the entire year just to put us in a truck and get us out of the state. And that was the state of Florida. I find it ironic that I'm back in Florida preaching the gospel. Not really. It used to frustrate me so much because I saw the call of God in my dad's life, and I used to just literally shake him and say, God, Dad, why are you not doing this? Why can't you put that down and put that down and just embrace what he's called you to? And he finally came to a place where he just told me, son, that time has passed me. He said, my only consolation is that you're fulfilling the call that I've dropped. But even growing up, he never spoke into my life. He's no longer living. He died a very lonely man. I took care of him. I became his father the last few years of his life. He died with his only possessions was a hefty trash bag and a few little pocket knives and some drug paraphernalia I didn't realize was in the bag. It was in my truck for days driving around. I finally got up the nerve to empty out the bag and found some just socks and underwear and some clothing and 2 pot pipes. I was like, wow, I've been riding dirty. I didn't even know it. My dad was that way. He could not turn loose of drugs to save his life. Even when he knew he was going to be faced with losing his family, he could not turn that loose. I used to have to frisk him when he'd get in my car. He had a beard down to here. And he'd hide his drugs in his beard. Yeah, true story. Be right down the road and he's digging around his beard. He finally pulls out, oh, there it is. I was like, get out of my car, Dad. But that's what I grew up with. I didn't have anybody speaking into my life. It wasn't until we went to a church in England, and the first service we walk in the door, they look at us and they take us back for tea and biscuits. You want some tea and biscuits? Sure, what's a biscuit? Cookie. Oh, I'm down. I like cookies. They never understood the concept of sweet tea, though, and iced tea. The first time I brought them to my house, and they said, okay, let me get this straight. You heat it up just to put ice in it and cool it back down. Yeah, I said, yeah, that's how we drink it. Y'all are daft. But the first time we walked back in there to get tea and biscuits in the cafe that they had, a little old lady named Janie Bingham began to speak over our lives and began to speak out everything that God had shown me. Everything that God had spoken to us. Finally, somebody, an older generation, was speaking over our lives, confirming that word. After 20-something years, almost 30, when it should have been the church speaking it to me when I was this tall. There's no excuses for that. Why? Because they had religion. There are a generation of people running around out there that hear the stories, but they have no experience of that story. Nor do they even have much of a belief for it. Now what do we have in churches? We have a generation of people who are older, who are constantly looking out for that, oh, just give me that old-time religion. Oh, if I could just get back to the day when people were just laid out and laughing and carrying on and great and just had great times. The younger generation have no clue about any of that. Nor do they seek that. I had a dream a while back that we went into a church and it was full of younger generation. I'm talking like late teens, early 20s. And they were lined up against the wall in giant blocks of ice. Stiff and frozen. Because this generation and this society has so isolated our younger generation. The only truth we know comes from the internet. And I'll be honest with you, 90% of that is false. I now see Christians propelling stuff on the internet that they know is false and they'll just put on there, oh, this is just a joke. And it's about somebody's life. I never understood how falsities could be entertainment. I get sick and tired of seeing posts, and if this offends you, I am so sorry, don't send them to me. Type yes and amen if you love Jesus. And send it to your friends. Well, how about this? Turn your computer off and go out into the community and love on somebody if you know Jesus and love Him. Instead of just sending a post, like yes and amen, and you'll be blessed financially. No, you'll be blessed if you begin to sow into the kingdom of God and do what you're called to do. You'll be blessed if you get up and go work. Oh, don't get me started. That's not even my message. I don't play patty cake games on the internet. Just don't send them to me, and you'll never be disappointed. And I'm not saying the internet's bad, and I'm not saying it's over the double. I'm just saying, man, Christians, we just got to be speaking truth all the time. And this whole bless me fairy dust, there is no such thing as Jesus running around in a fairy outfit just blessing people like that. Oh my God, he typed yes. It don't work like that. Sounds like that Geico commercial. I've never seen such a generation that is so disconnected and uninterested about helping the next generation. We spend our lives as adults seeking the things of God, if you're really wanting the things of God and you're on fire for the things of God, but we somehow forget along the way that our call is there to help those that are younger than us to come up. Do you realize that David, because of his sin, he knew, and God told him he would not be building his temple. He knew that. But God told him, but your son will. So do you know what David did? Instead of just saying, well, it's passed me by, I guess my son will have to take care of that. Good luck, son. No, he actually says in the scriptures that my son was not learned yet, that he wasn't educated yet to this point. So David spent the rest of his life collecting the materials needed to build the temple. The stones, the wood, the gold, all that was needed. Then he also began to collect and bring those people into the area that had artistic abilities and knowledge of how to build the temple. He so set his son up to be a success and the master of his own story. It was all done because the father realized, you know what? I may never see this with my own eyes, but by golly, my son will. Kind of reminds me of God, doesn't it? God built everything we sit on and have. He developed the heavens and the earth. He set everything's in order. He gave man and said, you have dominion over these things. And he did it all for his son, that one day he would send his son and inherit the entire kingdom. Our vision and our understanding of God, we miss it because we think we live in a society that has an age limit on everything we do. Well, you can't vote till you're this. You can't drive till you're this. You can't have a drink till you're that. You can't go do this unless you're this. We have a limit on everything, but we forget that God is not a limit of age. He goes from generation to generation to generation. And the same ways sin can visit to the 7th generation and beyond, I guarantee you blessings will go even further.
Amen.
Favor will go even further. Anointing will go even further. Speaking a word of encouragement will go a lifetime from generation to generation. But we have seen where speaking the bad things over people's lives, that will also travel generation to generation. Most of us adult Christians, young people, spend most of our lives trying to unravel everything that our parents did or didn't do. Everything we didn't have. Everything that maybe was spoken wrongly over us. Our insecurities. All these things. Our fears. All this stuff. Sounds like Gideon, doesn't it? I'm going to give you land, but don't fear it. What's the next thing he's doing? Hide and oppress fear. It's kind of like a no-brainer, isn't it? I want you to understand. Do you realize that David was 12 to 15 years old when he slew Goliath? 12 to 15. Do you realize the Hittite army The reason why they were so successful is because they trained their princes in such a manner that they were leading armies at the age of 14. 14! Leading armies, thousands, at 14. We can't get a 14-year-old to take out the trash. But do we blame them? No, I don't blame them. I blame us. I don't blame the younger generation at all. I can't blame the society. Samuel was 11 years old when God first spoke to him and called him out to be a prophet. Joash was 7 years old when he became king of Israel, of Judah. Jeremiah was 17 when God called him to be a prophet over Judah. 17. Joseph was 17 when he was sold into slavery. Prior to that, God was already giving him dreams about what he was called to be. Probably in his 13s, 14s, 15s. But 17, God decided, you know, it's time for your training, son. And when we see the story full scale, he says, brothers, I'm not even mad at you because God allowed that to happen in my life because he wanted to make me better. We spend too much time blaming this and blaming that, blaming Republicans, blaming Democrats, blaming the president, blaming this, blaming that. Do you realize that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, y'all know that story? One thing I was never told about the story, that they estimate their age could have been as young as 8, but no older than 19 or 20. Standing up and willing to go to the flames for their faith at that age. Don't worry about old people. Daniel was 80 when he went to the lion's den, so you're cool. There's still time. But we like to say, oh, well, Jesus was 30 years old when he began his ministry. I don't think so. He may have been 30 years old when the world knew about his ministry. It says when he was 12 years old, he walked into the synagogues and began to just confound the teachers at what knowledge he had already obtained. 12. Now this was not ordinary because you had to be the age of 13 before your parents stopped teaching you and you began to go to the teachers for teaching. They call that bar mitzvah in a man's life. You became a man. Now your parents stopped teaching you and it's time for the rabbis and the church to begin to teach you. So what did Jesus do? He came in at 12. Do you realize that there's actually documents written that actually talks about Jesus? It was never part of the scripture, but it talks about things that he did when he was 5 and 6. Stories, these are legends, and I have no proof of it, although it's documents, but I don't expect any less from the king of the world. God was even allowing him to develop things when he was young. At 5 years old, he separated water. This is what one of the things said. At 5 years old, he separated puddles of water, and they were dirty and murky, and he actually spoke over them, and they became clean. 5. And his Father in heaven, because when he went in at 12 and said, hey, but you got to know when his parents came looking for him, you know I've got to be in my Father's house. Where did you think that developed? From a young age. 5, 6 years old. There was another story when he was 6. Now the Gospels only focus on him pretty much when he comes in on the scene, pretty much 12 on. Because they felt like at the time, I believe, that his early life just wasn't that interesting. So 5 or 6. I want you to know that God is challenging us to change some things. He is challenging us to change some big things. I had a dream the other night, and I found myself walking through a church. And in this church, I saw all age groups from diapers to the early 20s. What I got the sense was this was like some kind of a summer thing, and that everybody was coming together to show what they had learned. In this church, I began to see it. Now, some of it's very symbolic, so you have to move beyond what I say here. Know that that's how God speaks to me. It's symbolic. But what I saw was groups that were being trained not according to age, but according to what they were called and gifted to do. Now in church, what we do is we take a group of kids and we put them in a class because they're 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 10, 10 to 12, and we begin to teach them all the same. Now that's great and that's a good start, but that's just the foundation. What about actually praying and saying, God, what have you called this child to do? Matter of fact, it was Jewish tradition that you prayed and you asked God what that child was to do before they were born. Matter of fact, I'll take it a step further. The name God gave you to give them, their name meant what they were called to do. Wow, we have lost that from generation to generation. You realize it only takes 4 generations to actually remove God completely from the lives of the people? 4. You will find we're in a generation right now where this generation is at the most risk and most danger for having any of the things of God in their life. Because you know why? Because we haven't been the best example. I began to watch as different groups of people came up. There was a whole group that were just good with swords. And they began to do sword play, and they began to do battles. I saw another group of kids I saw them in diapers. There were nets above the church, and they were actually tumbling and doing different things, and they were very agile and very acrobatic. And they began to do what they were called to do. Then I saw what I call the wall walkers. The wall walkers freaked me out because they came out like crabs, and they were able to climb walls just like Spider-Man. They were of all age groups in that category. Because the younger begin to learn from the older above them, and older above them, and older above them. Now, I'm not saying we're going to train your kid to climb like Spider-Man. They already do that. What I am saying is we need to get down to the root of what every person is called to do. What every person is called to do. You are drawn to the speaking because I believe God's going to have you preach the Word of God, son. You ever felt that? A little bit? You've got talents and abilities on the inside of you that God has placed there, and you have a desire to be more than what you are. That's not by mistake. There is such purpose on your life. But the world has tried to keep you so bound and so muffled from what the voice of God is saying. I urge you, get quiet before God, and I promise you He'll speak to your heart. And you're going to find things that you were good at. He placed in there from the beginning. One of the leaders in this church, and I find it by no strange accident, it was Doug, who was our children's pastor, had a dream this week. And he called me and he said, buddy, he said, I saw you and Amy had this big yacht. And this yacht was full of young people. And you were getting ready to shove off and start traveling with these young people. And when I wasn't allowed to go, though, he said there had to be work to be done where we were at. And he says, you all had this big multi-million-dollar yacht. He said, I had a $5 inner tube from Walmart. And he said, that just wasn't fair. And he said, but I had to go back because the tide and the current was too strong, and I had to go back. It was time before you all got ready to leave. And he said, I couldn't make it back because the current was so strong. The current, I could not swim against it, and I was just floating around in my $5 inner tube, and I just couldn't get anywhere. And one of the children jumped off, and most of these were young teens, late teens, early 20s, jumped off the ship, paddled over to him, and pushed him back into shore like a motorboat. He said it left a wake. He said he couldn't believe the endurance and the speed that this kid had. And when he got back to shore, and we began to pull out, he walked into a store, and he heard over the intercom God's voice, and it said, I have been trying to get the attention of the older generation for so long, but they are choosing to be unmoved with what I'm asking of them. So now is the season where I move to the next generation and I begin to use them powerfully. We have a responsibility in that. To be like a David who put every resource he had to the success of his son. We have a responsibility as adults, whether we've made it or haven't, whether we're still trying to figure it out or not. Listen, I think we'll spend most of our life trying to figure it out. There comes a time where you just quit trying to figure it out and just start doing it. There's a responsibility we have to speak into their lives. A lot of times we overlook things in stories. We overlook key players in stories. You know what? I love the one person that you overlook in the story of when Jesus fed the 5,000. And when Jesus fed the thousands, there was a couple instances. The one thing that we overlook in the story, that it all started with a little boy who had fishes and loaves who decided to sow it into the kingdom. Jesus multiplied that offering he gave. Listen, they were not having food. They were hungry. And this kid has got a little spread going on, and he could have just said, you know what, I'm just going to take my little loaves and fishes and I'm going to go over here and hang out under this tree. Good luck. Hope you get yours. But he didn't. He actually came as a little boy and said, I have this. It's all that I have. You see things that nobody else sees. It's called discernment. You have a level of discernment you don't even realize yet, but you see things and it freaks you out what you see sometimes. It really freaks you out, doesn't it? Don't be fearful of that, because God's going to begin to open your heart to see the symbolics in what He's showing you. God is trying to speak to your heart even at your age. How old are you? 10. Woo, you're already past the kingly age. Do you realize God is wanting to give you revelation that will confound everybody in this room? I'm using a big word. Freak them out. Be like, what just happened? That kind of stuff. He got you too. One of the most excited moments we ever had is when Amy and I were the youth pastors at a church in Kentucky. God told me when we took these group of kids, now we had kids and they were from 8 all the way to 28. It was a weird group. Sometimes God will have you do things and you do it on a small scale and you don't realize what God's trying to show you in this thing. And then 10 years later you look back and go, oh, whoa, okay. That's what that was for. Isn't that funny? Sometimes it takes us a while to catch up on the slow uptake. And I was like, God, first of all, I don't know nothing about being a youth pastor, and I really don't even know if I want to be a youth pastor. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? Amy and I were like, what are we supposed to do with them? And God says, well, teach them an alpha. Teach them a basic program. And so I was like, okay, we'll break it down into this. He said, no, don't break it down into anything. Teach them like they're adults. Teach them like they're men and women of God. So we began to teach them for weeks and weeks and weeks. We began to pour into them and teach them. And then I was like, okay, now God, now what would He do? He said, now you need to have a youth service and you let them do it all. God is about showing you, and then He'll show you how to do it, and then He'll release you to do it. But we have a generation of people, we just want to read about how things were done and never step out and do it. So we had our first youth service, and we were excited. And I was thinking, okay, as youth pastor, I guess I got to preach. And God says, you ain't preaching. They're preaching. It was the biggest service we ever had in the history of that church. We had over 150 people showed up just because they knew that their children were partaking in this. What they saw was not quite to the level of what they thought they were going to see. Oh, bless their little hearts, they're going to put on a little play. It's going to be so good. That's the only time I was able to ever do anything in the church when Christmas time came around. I had to be a stupid wise man every freaking year. I remember one year I played the trumpet, and they actually had me play Silent Night, Holy Night on the trumpet, and I bombed that. That was the only time in the church, in the history of the church, we were allowed to be seen. But even then, we were told exactly what to say, what to do, and we were also told what not to say and what not to do. We spend that, don't we? Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. Don't embarrass me. They always looked at me when they said that. We released these kids to the service, and we're like, God, have your way. Use whomever you choose to use today. And they put on this play, and it was just tremendous. There was not a dry eye in the house. People were coming to the altar. They began to get up and prophesy over people. They began to lay hands on people. They began to speak over people. They began to preach, and the place was completely undone. Within 2 weeks, we had so many complaints from the parents because it made them feel uncomfortable because the youth were flowing and hearing in a place they had never achieved in their life. I'm not so sure we can handle this. And it was shut down. What do we tell our generation? Kids, it's okay to be free in God, but don't go past where I'm at because you might make me feel uncomfortable. Well, I don't hear God like that. How are they speaking those things over their lives? See, that's why God loves to go to the young, because they've not had a lifetime of being conditioned to what they can't do. They've not had a lifetime to be conditioned and told that that's not normal. But the older we get, the more set in our ways we get. Amen? But God always says, I want you to come at me like a child. I want you to be a little child when you come to me. That takes on a whole new different revelation of saying, I want you to lose everything you think you know and just be a kid and climb up in my lap, and I'm going to show how awesome you can do things. I'm going to show you how to build it. And it may confound the people. It may totally make us feel uncomfortable. I don't care. Because I've got children of my own that I want to see the fullness of God in their life. And I'm in the same place Gideon was, where I'm frustrated to hear all these stories about the generation before me. Frustrated to hear the stories of how God moved in these powerful ways back 10 and 15 years ago. And we're not seeing it in the church today. That's because we're spending too much time trying to get back to redig that old well, that God's trying to shift us into a new place where there's a river under that well that we should be tapping into. One of the first dreams God gave me about this region, and He showed me a pastor, and this pastor is a pastor in this region, and I know he's just an example of what's going on. And God began to show me, He says, I want you all to dig deeper than you've ever dug before. I want you to dig deeper than anyone you've ever seen dig before. Because that's what we do. This pastor, I saw him digging, and this is not called the treasure coast for nothing. I saw him digging, and what I saw was a road about the size of a 2-lane road, about 1 foot deep, and I didn't understand the fullness of what God was showing me years ago. And as he began to dig, they began to pull up bits of gold and gold dust and gems and all these things. And they laid them out on a table, and they were just looking at them like, wow, this is awesome. But then God had us go behind them, and He says, now I want you to go deeper. So we began to go way down. We started pulling up big chunks of gold, big rubies and diamonds, the threshold of a doorway I found, and keys on a ring. And God told me, He said, the generation before you has been content to have services to see a little gold dust, see some little diamonds fall, see some rubies. They've been content to come to a place where they're satisfied with the little, but they stopped and they began to honor that little as if that's as far as God could take them. And He said, and all the resources of heaven that I had stored up, just like David had stored up for Solomon, were shut off. Because they weren't going to do nothing with it. They were happy with a little wood hut, and I had a palace to build. So that really stirred me. And just recently this week I realized for the first time, and God began to tell me, are you willing to start digging deeper in your life? There is truth. Listen, if you come to this church, you have to know you're going to hear some truth, and it's going to be weird, and I feel bad for our visitors. I'm so sorry. But I'm not really. It's just what God does. I want to know truth in my life. I want to know what is stopping me from obtaining everything that I read in the Word of God. I want to also know, God, what can you do to set us up for this younger generation so that they can be successful? Because one day, we're going to be done. And they're the ones that are going to carry the flames of revival. What kind of flames are we giving them? It's like passing the torch. I feel like God wants to give our children a flamethrower and we're handing them candles. I feel like God wants us to equip our children to be lions and we're creating pussycats. Y'all come worship. I think we're really wrapped Just how young is too young? I came across a group. There's an older couple that I came across. They had to be in their, I think their late 70s. And I was in Henderson, Kentucky, and I'll never forget, they spoke a word over us, and I began to watch them. And they had a group of younger kids. I mean, they had kids that were 10, 12, and they had them up to 20s, and low 20s. They were traveling around and going from church to church and releasing these kids. I had never seen anything like it in my life. These kids were speaking personal things over people's lives and calling stuff out. They weren't intimidated. And they looked like just little small clusters of groups. They'd gather around somebody. They began to speak truth into their life. They began to speak what God told them to speak. And when they walked away, those people were on the floor crying their eyes out. That was a younger generation. And I'll never forget just being in awe of that. And I asked him, I said, how does this even work? And they began to speak a word over us. And they said, look, I'm old now. But it's time for you all to come up as the next generation and begin to teach the children like this. Because I think it's time. Listen, this isn't just for the kids. It's time for us adults to get busy. It's time for us to get busy with the things of God. It's time for us to actually start doing this stuff and not just coming and sitting and watching it happen. I don't care if you're 80. I don't care if you're 8. I think we have a generation of people walking around so unsatisfied, so unfulfilled, looking for anything to fill it with. But we have neglected to speak truth over their lives. I'm going to ask right now, but everybody just stand to your feet. We're going to do something different. Can I have anybody from their mid to lower 20s all the way down to the youngest in this room to come up here and just stand? Don't be embarrassed. It's no crazy. Everybody. All that qualifies the whole row full of you. Come on, man. Come on, man. I'll hang out with you. It's no crazy. We're not crazy. We're all right. Please come up to the front row. How about that? There you go. Come on, I need you too. You're going to hang out here in the front? Just put your feet on the floor. That way I know you're touching. There you go. Now you're there. You're at the altar. He's like, hold on, I'm not there long. This is the next generation. Now, older people, wiser in the Lord people. I'm not even going to say that. I've seen some kids that are wiser in the Lord than some things than me. I want you to gather around behind them. And I want to see you stir up the gifts on the inside of you and begin to pray for them. I know this is going to be awkward, strange. If you're a visitor, I'm sorry. Just come on. We're weird that way. You're already here. You're here. Want your family. It's good. Young people, I want you to open your hearts right now and ask God to show you something. Show you something about yourself. I want you to ask Him. I'm just serious. Y'all dream? You dream? You ever felt like God gave you a dream? Yep. Ever felt like God gave you a dream? How old are you? 8? Wow. You could be a king. How old are you, Rocky? I know you know because you tell me all the time. You're not too young. You're not too young. You're not too young. You're not too young. This society may say you're too young, but you're not too young. You're not too young. Pray for them right now as we worship. There are singers, there are dancers, there are musicians in here. There are preachers, there are pastors, there are prophets standing before you. There are children with amazing discernment. There are children in here that have faith far beyond anything that we could ever have. It's time to release it, church. It's time to be that church that we're called to be. I know that we're called to this because when we first came out the gate 3 years ago, we were so attacked in the area of young people and lost them all. That's how I know when God's saying you're called to that. So as we worship right now, kids, it's your job to hear the voice of God. If God gives you something, I want to hear about it. If God speaks to you, I want to hear about it. If you just get a picture of something, I want to hear about it. If you just get a feeling, I want to hear about it. Because the Holy Spirit's going to speak to you today. Come on, let's worship. Be released, church.